All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, the essential updates for your on-premise Lawson system. Today's topic is more going to be kind of a knowledge transfer and a Q&A, or I guess roundtable discussion, talking about the latest updates to the compatibility matrix that Infor put out at the beginning of this year, what that means to your organization, and ultimately kind of best practices for support and maintenance going forward. First, a little bit about Intellius. We're headquartered in Dallas, Texas, and have been around and in the Lawson space since 1999. We are currently an Infor Alliance partner, specializing in all sorts of different things around the Infor Lawson space, and now obviously the Cloud Suite products, offering a variety of technical services, upgrades, application consulting, cloud services around the Lawson v10 and version 11. And then we also have a set of software offerings to support the Lawson products, kind of add-ons like the benefit add-ins, payroll job automation, things like that. So a quick overview of the agenda, keep it short and simple. What's new, what's changing, key takeaways from that, and then open it up for a Q&A at the end. I think the most important updates that by now pretty much everyone is aware of, I think, that Infor updated the compatibility matrix in December, I believe, with some key changes around the support for operating systems. So I think this is one of the biggest changes probably since a lot of users went on to the version 10 platform, and will require kind of significant investment and upgrade to modernize the operating system backend databases to support the systems long term. So with that, there's now support for Windows Server 2016, 2019, and then on the database side, SQL Server 2019, Oracle 19c. And then we also have some updated support for Amazon Corretto, which is one that a lot of customers have been asking about ever since Oracle decided to start charging license fees for Java 8. There's now an open source alternative that we can move our Infor environments to. There's also some updated ADFS support, so more modern versions of ADFS, newer versions that a lot of customers have been asking about for a number of years. Some of the key dates to look at, and I think why this is really important. If you're on the Windows platform today, pretty much everybody at this point is on Windows Server 2012 R2 for the application servers. And Microsoft now, or well, their final date of end of support for that is October 2023. So why that's important is if you're running Server 2012 R2, for your Infor environment, at that point in time, you'll no longer be receiving critical updates, security patches, things like that to the operating system. And so it's a very good idea to start planning for an upgrade of that prior to the end of support date. And that's true of all of these products. But now with these new changes to the compatibility matrix from Infor, we kind of have a roadmap for what exactly that means. So Windows Server 2012 R2 in October 2023, SharePoint, which is part of, if you're still using Mingle Foundation, that product is coming, has an end of support date coming up. Same with the SQL Server backend, so 2012, 2014. And then on the Oracle side, a lot of customers are trying to upgrade to at least 18C or 19C is a big initiative now as well, just due to a number of different end-of-life dates on the various Oracle platforms or versions. On the software side of things, there's also some other key dates. A lot of them are in red now, meaning we are past due on them, but there are still some customers who haven't done them. So for these items in red, if you haven't yet done these, I would recommend getting on that ASAP. Most recently, the Tax Factory 10 end of life customers are required to upgrade to Tax Factory 11. So that was something just recently this past month. It's kept us very busy helping customers upgrade. And if you haven't already done that, need to get on that right away. Also, kind of an old topic, but still relevant for some customers, the implementation of ADFS, replacing the traditional LS as STS or LDAP bind. That was required by Infor in March of 2019, but we found there's still quite a few customers who haven't yet made the move, and that's going to be a risk coming up because a lot of the newer versions of the products require it. So you're going to be at a point now where if you're trying to update your environment, you're going to be also putting in ADFS and kind of increasing the scope of that effort in order to do so. IE11, I throw on here, not super modern browser, not a lot of people still using it, but I do find that a number of customers are interacting with Lawson using IE11. That is officially, end of support as of October last year. And so to get modernized with that, at this point, Infor is basically saying if you report issues with IE11, too bad. And so looking to update the environment and portal packages to support some of the later or more modern browsers like Chrome and Edge and Firefox would be a good idea if you still have anyone in your environment using IE11 with your Infor products. One that just came up is the Mingle 11. So Mingle 11 is another name, Mingle Foundation 11. That is what most customers deployed as part of their V10 upgrade. That actually just became end of life in March of this year, so a couple months ago. The upgrade path for that is moving to a product called Infor OS, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But basically, if you look down on the line, Microsoft Silverlight, that's a product that Microsoft delivers that the older version of Mingle is dependent on. And so because Silverlight is going to be end of life later this year, Infor is retiring or putting the old Mingle product into sustained maintenance as of a couple months ago. For the ADLDS, LDAP channel binding, this is one that another Microsoft initiative they pushed out last year. And at the time, there was going to be a hard deadline to change your LDAP connections from a non-secure simple bind to a secure LDAP-S bind connection. And that would be both to your AD or also the local LDAP or the ATOM or ADLDS that Lawson uses in a Windows environment. That's one that doesn't necessarily have a hard date, but for security reasons is recommended ASAP and can be implemented at any time. And then Oracle Java 7, the end of life date is a ways out, but ultimately, if you're still running Java 7 in your environment, there's definitely some security vulnerabilities with that. And additionally, pretty much all of the newest versions of the Infor products are going to require Java 8. So as part of an overall environment update or pack, service pack, should be looking to upgrade to Java 8. There's a lot of different things going on, a lot of different products, a lot of different dates. Kind of a bit complicated in terms of understanding, obviously the impact is obvious, but what do we do about that and how do we plan for it? I think what can be one of the most complicated things to add into that is really digging through the compatibility matrix, looking at inventory of all the products you have installed, Infor, third party and otherwise, the operating system, the databases, and really get an idea of what the products you have are, what the lifecycle policies are for those products, and kind of back into a date that way. But I think it's really important to start planning your Infor roadmap now. Some of these dates are a couple years out, but in order to upgrade, for example, the operating system across all the servers in your environment, that's a pretty large initiative. talking maybe 4 to 6 months at a minimum to do that, and requires extensive user testing and things like that. So when you realize that, well, it's a 6-month project, we may need to get capital funds approved for it, we need to plan testing, we can't, we're not going to go live with that around things like open enrollment and year end. And so all of a sudden, those dates really aren't that far away. So it's a good idea to start planning now for both, what you need to do to support your on-premise environment, but I think also looking forward. So a lot of customers are still a little bit hesitant and reluctant to move to version 11 or Cloud Suite. They're not sure if that's something the organization's going to go with. But start to think about these dates. This is going to be a large investment to support the on-premise environment. And so whether or not you're moving off Lawson or Cloud Suite is going to start in a year, you're still probably going to have that on-premise environment supported in some capacity. And even if you go live on another system or you upgrade, for what duration do you need to continue to run your on-premise environment for Lawson for whatever purposes? So thinking about future state for Import, your roadmap for your ERP solution, how that project is phased, and ultimately how long do you need to support this on-premise Lawson environment? So aside from all of the dates that are coming up, I also think it's important to take a look at the Lawson product life cycle. This is just a simple, very high-level overview of what it looks like, particularly focused on the LSF product. But ultimately, you're never wanting to be more than 2 patches back or 2 releases back from whatever's current, because in that event, you're not going to be in a position to receive any security updates, priority 1 fixes, and things like that. So what the kind of N-2 policy looks like is that, for example, the current version of LSF is 10.0.11. 1 back from that would be 10, and then 2 back would be 9. And so, hypothetically, if you're on LSF 10.09 now, and this month LSF 10.0.12 comes out, 10.09 would no longer be receiving any P1 updates. And so I would be wanting to look at upgrading to the latest version of LSF so that I'm in a position to receive any of those major updates that come for whatever reason. So with that, I would, again, be careful, because you'll start to find that, oh, well, if I want to upgrade to this version, there's all sorts of other dependencies. Well, I need to be on ADFS, or I need to be on a newer version of Oracle, or a newer version of SQL, or Landmark has to be upgraded. There's all sorts of these little dependencies, and so I think it's important to really start planning out that roadmap, look at the compatibility matrix, look at an inventory of your current products, and find where all those dependencies are. Because what we found with customers is, especially if you've been a little bit reluctant to patch, you're on a version maybe of the environment that your implementation partner took you up on for version 10, and you haven't really touched it for a couple of years. In that type of scenario, I think these updates start to quickly snowball. Oh, just take an LSF patch, but in all of that time and with all of these dependencies, it also means you got to touch all these other applications, and so it snowballs into this larger initiative. And I think it's important to plan and be strategic with that implementation and rollout. And particularly that is around the third-party products. So Java 7 versus Java 8, IBM WebSphere fix packs, COBOL compilers, things like that, where you may need to be updating those as well. So lots of information, lots of different dates, lots of different products. I think this slide kind of does a nice job of highlighting, if I was in the customer's position and I knew my environment, is in need of updates, and maybe we haven't done some of these things, how do I go about tackling them? Because ultimately, if you're going to be in Lawson in the next 2 years on premise, you're going to have to do all of these things. So starting at least to try and get ahead of it, start planning for it, be strategic about it, I think is really smart. So things that we say yesterday, if you haven't done these already, they're kind of prerequisite to everything else in this roadmap, and you're already delayed on them, and get on those ASAP. That'd be moving to ADFS, Microsoft's Active Directory Federation Services, the LDAP-S channel binding, and then Tax Factory 11. The things in the category of now, these are things that are good ideas to do, bring a lot of value, I think, to your business users. Good updates, enhancements to the applications, kind of a technology refresh. And so this Infor OS Lite, that is the Mingle 12, if you will, the replacement for Mingle Foundation, the SharePoint-based Mingle that you had with your version 10 upgrade. That product's now in sustained maintenance, and so the next path would be an upgrade to Infor OS Lite. It's a much more modernized, robust technology platform. I think a major improvement over the legacy product that it's replacing. LSF 10.11, Portal 10.1, refresh of that environment platform. Portal 10.1 brings a more modernized look and feel, user experience, HTML5, Soho controls, things like that to the Lawson product. And then Landmark 11. So if you have IPA or contract management or global HR on-premise today, looking at upgrade to Landmark 11, there's a lot of benefits that stack brings, and ultimately it is the kind of underpinning technology platform that the Cloud Suite Financial Supply Management, global HR run on in the cloud. So you can bring that to your on-premise environment and run it with Lawson version 10. So those initiatives that can be done now, are also something that can be included as you look into these server upgrades. Things that I would start to look at, now or certainly this fall and start planning for. If you're running on the Windows platform, you're going to need to upgrade the operating system for every single server. And primarily, it's going to be Windows 2019. There's one straggler, the Landmark environment has to be on 2016, but upgrading that operating system, upgrading your database platform, so it's to SQL 2019 or Oracle 19c. All good ideas, all things that could potentially be done together with these items in the now phase. So it's not necessarily linear, this timeline. There can be things done in different orders or together. Just depends how you want to phase it out. A lot of customers are coming to us and asking, hey, we want to upgrade our operating system, and we also want to update LSF. And so when we do that, those things can be combined, where we'll build out new environments on the newer operating systems and just install the latest and greatest technology products onto those. And so you kind of kill two birds with one stone. You're getting that environment refresh, update, and also the modernized, upgraded operating system at the same time. But they can be parted out too, if that's something your organization is interested in. The goal being that by October, we will have a stable platform. So something that you can ride out into the sunset. If you're really planning to be on Lawson for a long time, this will put you in a position from a technology perspective, from a third-party vendor perspective, where you can run the product and really not have to invest too much else in upgrading it, supporting it on the technology back end until it's ultimately put into sustained maintenance as well. And throughout this whole process, this underlying arrow is preparing and evaluating your move to Cloud Suite, seeing where that fits in, at least starting to think about it, be strategic about it. Knowing where that sits, I think, is important. If that's something that you're really considering now, maybe you don't have to make this investment in upgrading all these servers. If you can get live on Cloud Suite before the decommission of 2012 R2 or some of these database platforms, or understanding, we're going to start that in 2022. Well, how long are you going to have to support your on-premise environment, and start to be strategic and plan, around those dates. And I guess that would be true. We hope customers stay with Infor and upgrade to Cloud Suite and all those things, but ultimately, if you choose to move off of Infor, the same still holds true, regardless of the direction you take. So when we talk about doing server upgrades, there's really two kind of methodologies to this. One is recommended, that has the star on it, the side-by-side upgrade, and then we can also do things in place. So the difference here in a side-by-side, it's going to be basically a parallel build out. So we're going to ask for fresh, brand new servers to be stood up. We're not going to touch any of the current servers that you're running Lawson on production or test. So we get brand new servers, we do brand new installs, and then we migrate all your data over to those servers. The benefit of that is it allows for a true parallel testing in the old and new environments simultaneously. And so we can run, payrolls in your new production while your current production, remains untouched. And so it's a really nice environment for doing great, full regression testing, unit testing of all the different applications and components. It's also a little bit safer, but with that becomes, there's more time and cost to deploy. Obviously, to build out all these new servers, you need to have the infrastructure to support it. To do brand new installs is going to require more on the services side, to actually build everything out again, and that is the big drawback of it. But the benefit is, that risk mitigation, simple rollback strategy. It's not a big bang, everything at once. Very clean, easy to back out, easy to test. Definitely the preferred method. The other option would be an in-place upgrade where there's no new servers requested. Basically, what would happen is your current servers would all be upgraded as is, both on the operating system level and also potentially the environment components where those dependencies lie. Major drawbacks to this one, there's limited or no ability to really run any parallel testing. It's a very complex rollback strategy because what happens if something goes wrong after we go live? Sometimes snapshots are difficult to manage when you're dealing with upgraded operating systems. And if something fails, it's very hard to roll back from sometimes. But the benefit of that is it's much faster and cheaper to deploy those types of upgrades than doing the side-by-side. But overall, side-by-side, strongly recommended, both by me personally, by Infor. We've seen customers do in-place upgrades when they're in a pinch. It works, but it's definitely not something I would choose as a customer and not something that I personally, recommend. And through all of this, starting to look at Cloud Suite readiness. Maybe you're not ready to make this decision, but what can you do now in your on-premise environment to start to get ready for an upgrade? I think going to Infor OS and Portal 10.1, Infor OS is the technology platform in the cloud. So if you were to go to Cloud Suite, Infor OS would be kind of your front-end user experience with the Soho 4.0 controls and things like that. And so by implementing or installing Infor OS on-premise, upgrading your Portal version to 10.1, you're moving your users over to getting used to that Soho 4.0 responsive control design, hook and loop. There's all sorts of different names for it. And starting to sunset Smart Office, that does go away. So moving users into a 100% browser-based experience is a good move. Upgrading to Landmark 11. This is something you can do with Lawson v10 on-premise if you have IPA and for process automation. Upgrading your Landmark environment to 11 brings quite a bit of benefit, I think, in IPA development tools, performance, administration, things like that. It's also, the runtime environment for Cloud Suite. So global HR, talent management, financial and supply management, all run on Landmark 11. And so that's a component you can bring to your on-premise environment and start to familiarize yourself with, become comfortable with ahead of any sort of upgrade. Starting to look at Burst, as an analytics package, that is something that you can use with v10 and is the kind of de facto standard package delivered with Cloud Suite. So this provides potentially a way for you to familiarize yourself with the new tools while remaining on your current system and starting to deploy some of that technology ahead of time. And then looking at this RICE analysis, so that your reports, interfaces, customizations, extensions, starting to get an inventory of everything you have, because at some point with an upgrade, those will need to be potentially replatformed, retired, et cetera, but knowing what you have, an inventory of that is important. And I think also as you begin to build out, additional reports, interfaces, customizations, et cetera, in your current environment, trying to understand the roadmap for that and technologies that are available. So, for example, things that one can do in the cloud versus on-premise, maybe trying to build that new solutions using cloud-friendly technologies versus something you may not be able to use or run in the cloud, things like that. But having a good inventory of this information is crucial and helpful to any sort of upgrade, whether it's Cloud Suite with Infor version 11 or another ERP, making sure you have that information documented, accounted for, so that you understand what the lift is and what the effort is when you upgrade. So in terms of next steps, again, I think planning that roadmap is crucial. Understanding where you're going with the technology, what kind of investments you're going to have to make. Some of them optional, many of them required. It can be complicated. The compatibility matrix is a great document. It's very helpful. It's also very confusing. So, we would be happy to schedule a meeting to discuss your current environment, your current, deployment needs, et cetera, as an organization, and help develop a custom tailored roadmap and understand, how we can help make your projects a success. So at that, we'll open it up to questions that anyone has. You can send them in the chat. I have a couple of them already. I don't know, Chandra, if you're on, if you have any other ones, but I can go ahead and read from them. Have you performed the OSQL? Yes, we have personally done a few of the OS and SQL upgrades. Have we done any in place? I have in the past with 2008 to 2012 R2. It was not really by choice. It was kind of like, oh, we need to upgrade, and no one was thinking about it, and what's the fastest way to do it. Again, I wouldn't really recommend that across the board for upgrading to 2019. So my preferred method, again, is that side-by-side upgrade. I think it's much safer and provides, the ability to be the most successful with your upgrade approach. Someone is asking about Landmark on Linux. I don't know that specifically. Right now, it's only supported on Windows and AIX. So I don't have a date on that. I'm not sure if that will be generally available or not. Someone asked for the presentation slides. I think, yeah, for everyone who registered, we'll be sending out a copy of the slide deck and a link to the recording for the presentation. Somebody asked, we were running some of our Infor components on a shared SQL Server instance. Should those components run on its own dedicated SQL Server instance? I guess it depends what those components are. Generally, if they don't have anything to do with Infor, yes, I prefer to have them separated out, because you start to run into things like this where, now you may be trying to upgrade Infor to 2019 SQL. Maybe those other components don't yet support it. So in general, I do like to have Infor on its own, all the Infor applications on their own SQL instance. Someone asked when LSF 10.012 is coming out. Well, honestly, usually this month, really any day now. Infor releases a new MSP, ESP, the cyclics come out. What the name of that is going to be, I'm not quite sure. You know, it could be 10.0.12, it could be another CU on 10.0.11. I really don't have any specific insight into that, but I would expect, you know, traditionally in May every year, the new cyclic comes out, and so there should be information soon, really any day now. Somebody asked, what do you think about the new Infor STS authentication in lieu of ADFS? We've done a couple Infor STS implementations. I think the huge benefit is that you don't have to use ADFS. And so we have so many organizations come to us and say, well, can we do Azure? Can we do Okta? Can we do whatever else, not ADFS? Because our network teams, our security engineers, or whoever, they're trying to get rid of ADFS in the environment. And now you're asking us to put in another on-premise ADFS server, and we don't want to support that. And I get that. So Infor STS allows you to move to other things, typically more modern identity providers like an Azure or an Okta. Infor STS is a nice solution. It works well. The one thing I'll call out with that is, you know, it looks like now Infor's, you know, that's an upgraded licensing cost. So with Infor STS is delivered with the Infor OS product, and there's a couple different licensing models with that. The quote unquote free one, if you will, is the light version. So you're entitled to that if you have Mingle Foundation or Mingle 11 today. That doesn't include the Infor STS. So it's an upcharge on your Infor OS license to implement Infor STS. And so I would say, you know, I like the product. It works well. It allows a lot of options and flexibility in terms of your identity provider, but your organization will have to decide whether or not that upcharge is worth that option. Someone asks, in a Windows OS SQL environment, what changes have you seen in how it works or issues due to the new OS and or SQL? There really aren't many changes or issues that we've seen. And that's one of the, you know, unfortunate things with an upgrade of this size, is that, you know, it does work. There haven't been any major issues or really differences. But it's a large investment, and your end users aren't going to know that anything changed for the most part, particularly with just the operating system upgrade, which I guess is a good thing, but it's a large project, a large investment. It's going to require a lot of testing, and if I'm a payroll person or a finance person, not really getting anything out of it. It's a pure technology upgrade. That's, you know, unfortunate, but something to think about. But we haven't seen any specific issues with the newer operating system and SQL versions. Someone asked again if the session's recorded. It is, and if you registered online for the webinar, you'll be receiving an email with a link to the recording. Someone says we have several custom programs that may still be necessary after migrating Intellius and Lawson to the newest cloud versions. Have the custom Lawson jobs and payroll automation been tested with the new platforms, and is it easier to maintain? If you're moving to version 11 from 10, if that's what we're talking about, it's kind of a whole new ballgame. I mean, there isn't, you know, there's no HR11, there's no COBOL. It's all a Java-based platform. And so, you know, ultimately we can't move custom COBOL over like for like. But the good news with that is we find that a lot of times there's not as much a need for those custom COBOL programs. So a lot of them can be retired. Or if there is a need, using some of the newer tools like Configuration Console, the development time to build solutions that are equivalent is drastically reduced. You know, just for an example, you may have a custom COBOL program with 10,000 lines of code in it. We can write a solution in configuration console in, 40 lines of code. So it's drastically reduced in terms of the effort required for development and things like that. And in general, that's a whole nother topic of discussion, how you might re-platform some of those things. It's not like for like, but I will say that I don't believe I think there's a solution for all of your customizations. There's not going to be something where we just say that is not possible to do. You have to change your business process. I mean, there are enough tools and capabilities in the new platform to basically support any sort of requirement you may have on the customization side. Someone asked about minimum hardware specs for a side-by-side upgrade. That kind of depends on the organization. I mean, in general, if you're running Windows today and you're going to continue running Windows in the future, a lot of the sizing, will be the same or very similar for what's working in your production environment today. For new things like InfoOS, ADFS, it's a little bit different. You may not have those today, but that's something we could provide, sizing guidelines and estimates for those types of servers. But that would be an example of something that, might require a deeper dive or a separate meeting to talk about your unique situation and needs. Someone asked, these are mostly technical upgrades. How much functional change do these have on the users? Is it mainly cosmetic to them? They are almost 100% technical upgrades. However, and there will not be much functional change. One thing to think about, some customers choose to do this, others don't, is that typically what we find when we get into these projects is customers haven't taken a maintenance service pack, an MSP, in a long time. And they're pretty far behind on the application versions. And so that's one option to consider, and a lot of customers do. Say, well, if we're going to have to go through all this testing anyway, let's also apply an MSP. And so when you take that MSP, thousands of programs are going to be changed, and full regression testing is required. But that's going to be required anyway with these side-by-side upgrades, because even if the applications aren't changing and the data is not changing, we're still moving everything over to brand new servers. And so I recommend a full regression testing of all processes, running parallel payrolls, cutting checks, testing all your integrations, because you're literally lifting, shifting the entire data set, all of the applications, all the users, all the security to a brand new environment. And so that in and of itself requires pretty extensive testing to the end users, even though nothing's changing, but just because it's all moving. And so a lot of customers do choose to take an MSP at that point, just to kind of find some synergies there. We're going to have to do all this testing anyway. It's also a good idea to take the MSP. And so there is some change to the application side. Otherwise, yeah, it's cosmetic. That Portal 10.1, I really like it. It's a huge improvement to me over the old, stark white, Portal background that came on version 10. That is highly cosmetic. It does look different, but I like to say it's one of those things where you log in and you're kind of pleasantly surprised, and you very quickly find your way around. It's not like you need to schedule training sessions and write up all this documentation. Users should pretty easily be able to transition into the new environment. That looks like all the questions that are in there. If there's any other, feel free to unmute yourself. But I think, Chandra, did you have any other? Oh, here's some more questions. Okay. Well, I didn't see this one. I apologize. What is the cost benefit of going straight to Cloud Suite instead of upgrading 10.09? I would look at it this way. I mean, going to Cloud Suite is a big change, and it can be transformational. There's a lot of improved tooling that helps facilitate the move now, migration tooling and things like that. But it is, a big change in the application. Foundationally or fundamentally, a lot of the design principles are the same, or structural elements to the system are the same. But there's also a lot of opportunity to transform your business. If you've been on Lawson for 15 years, and everyone I talk to that's in that scenario says, well, if we could do it over again, we wouldn't have done this, this, or that. And there's something in their system that works, but they're not super happy with. And given the opportunity to upgrade to Cloud Suite with all of this added features and functionality, how much do you change? How transformational are you? That's a personal decision or unique to each customer. Obviously, going like for like is super fast, but do you realize all those benefits? At some point, slamming it, garbage in, garbage out. And so I would, argue that it's good to at least evaluate some of your options, look to be somewhat transformational and strategic in your upgrade. But obviously that comes at a cost in terms of an extended timeline and things like that. If you compare the numbers on paper, upgrading LSF 1009 to all the latest Lawson technology and going to Cloud Suite, there's no comparison. I mean, Cloud Suite is a larger initiative. But what I would look at too is that timeline, because having to upgrade the operating system and all of these things across the board is a large project and requires a large investment of time. It's not comparable to Cloud Suite necessarily, but it's a big enough number to start looking at, how can we offset that? If we can get rid of our on-premise environment and move to Cloud Suite and save, a bunch of money there, there's somewhat of a value proposition. But that's a tough one to answer, because on paper, it's always going to be cheaper just to upgrade what you have today than to go to Cloud Suite. But one thing I'll add to that, I guess, is, if you've decided to go to Cloud Suite and it is phased, starting to look at this as a way to minimize your on-premise footprint, right? So if you're going to go to Cloud Suite, there's going to be this bridge phase where you have kind of two ERPs to support, because you're probably not going to be able to move big bang every single thing in a Cloud Suite at once. A lot of times customers will phase it by suite or module and things like that. And so there's this bridge phase where you're kind of supporting two environments. And if you're going to go through that path and you're going to have to support your on-premise environments, is there a way to downsize? We're talking to a lot of customers about that, where, okay, we're going to be phasing into Cloud Suite and you have 5 environments on-premise today. And if we're going to move 50% of the ERP into Cloud Suite next year, do you still need 5 environments on-premise? And so can we start to decommission some of that hardware and then reduce ultimately the amount of overhead required to support it? Somebody asked, any specific examples of how Cloud Suite will not work for us? I don't know how to answer that one. Probably need a little bit more context. I mean, in general, I think Cloud Suite will work for everyone. There's a way to make it work for your organization. It's transformational. There shouldn't be any showstopper issues, but understanding that it is a big change in terms of how you interact with the system, the amount of training required for users to get up to speed on the new platform. And so, it's something to think about. Someone asked, I've previously heard that M4 Cloud Suite was available on premise. Is that still the case? I don't know. Maybe if you really beg for it. But personally, I would say no. I mean, and I wouldn't want to be in that position as a customer. You have to, if you're sticking with M4, really any vendor at this point in time, Oracle, Workday, you name it, it's SaaS. And so I think from a support and maintenance perspective, if I'm going to upgrade to quote unquote V11, it's got to be cloud, regardless of what M4 would sell you. And I'm not sure they're even allowing on-premise anymore at this point. And I will say, with that, a lot of customers I find they've heard at user groups or in forum, they talk to other cloud customers and they hear horror experiences. And some of that is justified. But I will also say that there's kind of two worlds in M4 Cloud, or whether this is right or wrong, it's a reality. You know, you really need to understand, is it a single tenant cloud customer who's running Lawson in the cloud versus a multi-tenant cloud suite customer? And I think there's a night and day difference where the single tenant customers are where I hear a lot of those complaints and frustrations, and the multi-tenant environment. You know, in my personal experience, we have a number of these projects in flight working with multi-tenant customers on a daily basis. It's night and day difference in terms of the support and that you get on the platform. And I think a lot of that is because of the SaaS model, and you're not in a unique deployment, and everyone is on the same farm, and if there is a problem, it's impacting everybody. And so it's stable. The support that you get is pretty good on it, and it's just different from the single tenant. So understand that difference when you start to talk to other customers about their experience in the cloud. Single tenant versus multi-tenant are in two different universes, and there's a big difference. And someone saying that our info rep would not sell a C11 on-premise cloud only. I mean, that's consistent with what I'm hearing. Pretty much a cloud only option. Are there any other questions? Here's someone's unmuted. I don't know if there was a verbal question, but it looks like the chat is exhausted. All right, well, I think that's it. I mean, if there are any other questions, my email's on the screen, rflannery@intellius.net. Feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to schedule a meeting to discuss your unique needs and roadmap as it relates to your Infor products. And again, thank you for joining us. Hope you have a good rest of your day.